And welcome back into the live casino hotel studio here in Baltimore. He's Glenn Clark. I'm Gary Stein. PLL Weekly is the show on Facebook Live, and we're brought to you by Mobil One Synthetic Oil. It keeps your engine running like new synthetic motor oils. Trusted protection. It's the Mobil Advantage.
I can't believe you actually got the name of the show right this week, Gary. I'm so proud of you.
Not only that, but I got the read, too.
Yeah, right? It only took us, 4 weeks in order to figure it all out, and then we got things. Now we're running smoothly, just in time for the All-Star break.
What's up, Glenn Clark Radio?
Everything is good, man. How about yourself? It was weird not having any games to watch this weekend, right?
It was a little weird, but it was good because anticipation builds for the All-Star Weekend. By the way, we should welcome in Griffin Bass.
Yes.
Who is with us, and he'll be with us.
He's going to be playing the role of me
right.
next week,
Exactly.
Admirably. In fact, I'm nervous that he'll do it better than I do.
I think you should be terrified, actually.
Stay away from my wife.
Yeah.
But no, I'm nervous about that. He'll be in with you next week as I'm down at the beach hanging out after. I get my own All-Star break next week is the way that it works.
Good for you, absolutely. The only problem is you got to take your little kitties down with you, right?
It is nerve-wracking, as I keep telling people. It's not quite the vacation that you want it to be because you really are just spending every moment of every day. Like, you can't just send them off to daycare during the course of the day while you're down at the beach. You are with them at all moments in pools and around oceans, and they're doing things you don't want them to do. It's not going to be a whole lot of fun or relaxing.
Basically, your life is over as far as the next 13 years are concerned.
That sounds about right. No. I understand what you're saying.
Right. It's not bad.
Right.
It just is.
Yeah, they're okay.
Right.
They're all right. They might one day get into college like yours did.
Exactly.
It's a whole goofy thing. I noticed your Princeton shirt today. Were you trying to suck up to Josh Sims?
Well, basically, yeah.
Okay.
Because my son went, obviously, P16, and I thought, in honor of that and Josh, I know he's not going to be able to see me, but we can certainly talk about it. And so absolutely, I think I thought ahead. Right. You know what I mean?
That's our guest today, by the way, Josh Sims, the head of lacrosse for the PLL and a former Princeton All-American from Annapolis by way of Severn High School. And I'm fascinated by this. Like, when you said he's the head of lacrosse, my first thought was, like, what does that mean?
Like, he's at the top of the mountain,
right? Like, the head of everything?
Right. Like, how do you get there? Do you have to climb?
Was there an election?
Right. But, yeah, that was the title, and really when we talked to him about this is really fascinating because he's got some experience with startup companies.
Sure.
And that's exactly what this is. And he is really in charge of all the operations. And when you think about it, this league moves its entire entity every week.
Right.
It's not like they have home bases, in each, and there's a home game for certain teams, and they got to move. They got to get up and move every week within 7 days, and that's what he's in charge of, and it's quite a task. Balls, sticks, players, hotels, airplane reservations, everything goes to wherever they're going. And that's what he's in charge of, is making sure that it all gets there.
Which is fascinating, right? Like, it's absolutely fascinating. And obviously this week it'll be kind of nice because they don't have to have the entire league in Southern California. They only have to have the All-Stars show up this time around. But it is a fascinating look at, and we've never seen anything like this before from a pro sports league where they're trying to do it with this sort of tour-based model instead of doing a city-based model. So it'll be fascinating to look at that. And, are they already looking ahead? Are they already looking into things they can do better moving forward differently next season, things along those lines? So that'll be a fascinating conversation that we can have with Josh.
Those are the questions we'll have with Josh Sims, and he'll be joining us in just a few minutes. First of all, though, the PLL was off last week. It was a bye week for the players. I'm sure the administrators and officials all worked and everything to get ready for the All-Star Game. Let's tell you a little bit about All-Star Game, as it's actually All-Star Weekend in Los Angeles. 44 of the top players in the PLL will participate. They did announce a couple of changes today, which we'll get to just a little bit later on. The two captains, the Whip Snakes, Matt Rambo, and the Atlas, Trevor Baptiste, they're arguably the two most dominant players in the PLL right now, and they are voted captains for the two teams. And the reason why is because they were the top two vote getters as far as the All-Star Game was concerned. The game will be played in LA at Bank of California Stadium, downtown Los Angeles. Game time is 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, the 21st. That'll be 5 p.m. Pacific Time. There will be a skills competition. It'll begin after that, approximately 10:30 p.m. Eastern and 7:30 p.m. Pacific Coast Time. And that will be this coming Sunday night, the 21st. The game is broadcast live on NBC Sports Network. They do have the game of the week. They'll have the All-Star Game as well this week from Los Angeles. The skills competition will be streamed live following the game, and that'll be on NBC Sports Gold. So, again, the PLL All-Star Game.
Do we know which skills they're doing during the skills competition?
I don't know all of them. That's something that we can certainly ask Josh about. I would think shooting, right? Shooting accuracy, speed. We'll see. So those are the skills. That is the skills competition starting at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Before we get on with Josh, just a couple of news and notes around the league. First of all, league standings after the quote-unquote unofficial first half of the league. The Whipsnakes are in charge. They're at 5-1. The Redwoods and the Chaos are tied for second at 4-2. The Archers and the Atlas come in tied for fourth at 2-4. And the Chrome got their first win not this past weekend, 2 weekends ago. They come in at 1-5. But keep in mind, and Glenn and I have talked about this over the last few weeks, how close this league is. The team that is basically in the basement right now, the Chrome, they're 1-5. They just won their first game. Their goal differential this year is +2. They're +2,
right,
and they're 1-5.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Whipsnakes, who are in first at 5-1, they're at +7. So the goal
not a lot of
differential
difference.
is a total of 5 goals
Yeah.
over 6 weeks. It is really a tight league. And with that, we'll get to some of the statistic leaders in just a moment. But right now, we'd like to welcome in the head of lacrosse. It's a pretty heady title for a young man who basically rose to fame here in the Baltimore area. Native of Annapolis, went to Severn School, was a high school all-star here in this part of town, then moved up to New Jersey, went on to Princeton, became a national champion, one of the great Princeton seasons of all time, 1997. Josh Sims, the head of lacrosse for the PLL, joins us here on PLL Weekly. Josh, welcome in. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you guys?
We're not too bad. You're with Glenn Clark, and also Griffin Bass is here as well, and you're on the PLL Weekly podcast. And, Glenn and I were just talking / joking about it. Head of lacrosse is a pretty all-encompassing title.
I'm pretty mad at my guidance counselor that didn't mention that it was an option for me at any point.
What does it mean, and how did you get it, basically?
Yeah, me either. But I would say that it is a lot, and it's a lot of things that I've done over the course of my career in different capacities, whether it's as an operator in the sports world or as a manager at Under Armour, working in the lacrosse category and on events like the Under Armour All-America platform, which I think lends itself well to some of the skills that are required of me now. So it was a little, I've been around different parts of lacrosse, and certainly I'm drawing on those different areas of expertise to kind of pull it together and be a part of PLL.
And, Josh, it's interesting. You're not that old. What are you, 40 now at this point?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. And you're in good shape. I mean, did you have thoughts of playing?
No. So, I joke that my brain says, yeah, that's a great idea. It's just my body that would certainly disagree with any attempts at trying to get out on the field. In fact, every time I step foot on the field, the joke is that I'll hurt myself. So, I do think about it because the game is so exciting, and I have friends that played professionally that are watching what the product out on the field, and they're just in awe and feeling the same way I do, that they just want to be out there and be a part of the excitement. So yes, in that sense, I definitely wish I was out on the field. However, I don't have it.
Hey, Josh, what was it? You're a lacrosse lifer, right? What was it about this league, this brand, this opportunity that particularly piqued your interest to say, this is where I want my next direction to be? And I guess, how has the experience lived up to your expectations when you jumped on board with the PLL and said, this is what I want to go do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the vision. And certainly the vision that Mike and Paul have for not only where the sport of lacrosse can go, but really transforming sports in general. And if you look at some of the work that's been done with NBC and some of the tweaks that we've made with the game, and you start to add that up, and it really builds up towards something much bigger. So I think that I saw the opportunity to get involved with something that I knew I could have never pulled off on my own, and there was a great group of people that were aligned, I think, in terms of what we wanted to accomplish. a lot of the changes and things that had frustrated me with the game and in the potential of it and not quite realizing that potential, I felt like could be realized with PLL. And so far, I really feel like, we've made great progress. There's certainly a long way to go and, a long road ahead. But, for getting things off the ground and any startup, it's always a challenge. And it's been a real thrill.
And we're talking with Josh Sims, the head of lacrosse for the PLL. This is PLL Weekly, the podcast with Glenn Clark, myself, Gary Stein, Griffin Bass sitting in as well. Josh is a former two-time NCAA champion with the Princeton Tigers, also a lacrosse All-American. And you can't see me right now, Josh, I know that, but I'm wearing my Princeton Athletics t-shirt because my son followed you at Princeton by about 16 years and been up to Princeton many a time watching games and just following him, and really, really a great place to learn and a great place to be. So just wanted to recognize that. What exactly do you do as far as head of lacrosse is concerned?
So I think if you were to really just boil it down into the simplest form, it's the product on the field. So the different buckets that I oversee are obviously the players, the coaches, the officials, their medical team and equipment team, and everybody that's, basically on the sidelines or on the field when we go out and play. And so it's all of the, it's getting them there. It's making sure they have equipment to play with, rules to play by, and, and that everything goes off without a hitch. So it's, those are the buckets. And I think, again, if in the most simple form, that's what we're doing.
So, Josh, this is interesting because I think you probably could be the only one in the country that has this type of job. And what I mean by that is this. There are no home teams in this league. In other words, there aren't, 3 or 4 teams that are at home and 3 or 4 teams that have to go on the road. You have to pack up and move this entire league's operation, basically, every week to a different location. Is that how you see it as well?
That is true. We are setting up our league in a new destination every weekend, and that does, when you say it like that, it sounds kind of daunting, and
yeah.
There's certainly challenges with moving 6 teams around the country versus one team visiting, one team home. However, there are also some great economies of scale when you do that, in terms of how you can leverage resources and how we can put on 3 games in a weekend and create an enormous environment and festival environment for our fans, and do things a little differently in that way. So there are ways that we benefit from it for sure, but there are some significant challenges with bringing such a large operation to a new location each week.
Josh, you talk about the things that are happening on the field. I wanted to get into that. How happy are you with the lacrosse itself that we've seen so far? And as Gary mentioned, overwhelmingly these have been close games, but the actual style, what's being sent out for the NBC audiences to see, maybe some folks that have never seen the game of lacrosse before, how happy have you been with the actual lacrosse that's been played? And is there anything as you start thinking about, maybe year 2 of the PLL, rules-wise, gameplay-wise, that perhaps you start thinking about and maybe tinkering with as we move towards year 2?
Yeah, I think, we're our harshest critics, but I still think we're really pleased with where we are. And I like to listen to our players and what they're giving in terms of feedback. And then I like to listen to our audience and our fans. And from our players' perspective, they've been, they've given incredible feedback about how energized they are to play, how intense the games are, how competitive they are, how some of the rule tweaks have made the game even more intense than in the past. How there's very few opportunities to kind of even catch your breath, and when that translates into the product that our audience gets to see, it's pretty captivating. And as I mentioned before, former players that I've talked to that are watching now are watching in awe and just wish they could be a part of it. And then you talk to a number of layperson fans that are not huge fans of lacrosse, And I think we're doing a good job of making the sport catchy and engaging and bringing new fans to the game, which is, ultimately where I feel like there's the largest opportunity for the sport.
Josh Sims, the head of lacrosse for the PLL, is joining us here on the PLL Weekly podcast. Josh, another challenge, and this I think falls under your purview, is sponsorships, negotiating deals with sponsors. And the interesting thing about that is that a lot of your players are personally sponsored. They're individually sponsored, maybe not by the same sponsors that the league is sponsored by. And one of the things that you need to make sure is that everybody is kind of satisfied in that situation. Talk a little bit about that and the process that you would go through to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, that's right. We have our sponsors that are a part of the league, and then we have our athlete exemptions, which allows our athletes to wear other products that are not part of the league sponsorships. So it's a little different than some models and conventional models with professional sports, but it's given, being a player-centric league and giving our players the opportunity to build their own brands and also to represent the brands that support them is really important to what we're doing and what we're about, while also bringing in brands and giving them a canvas to gain great exposure as well. And I think that, in terms of how we have to monitor that and make sure that our players are in compliance, that's ultimately what falls back onto our lacrosse ops team, is making sure that everybody has what they need to perform, but also to perform in ways that represents all of those different brands' interests.
Josh, I want to ask you, I want to go back to the on-the-field stuff, because I want to ask you something that we've never actually talked about on this show, but it is a voice that is out there in the lacrosse world, and that's that there's a lot of people that believe that the game of lacrosse would be better without face-off specialists and without the face-off, and would be a better sport if you just gave the ball to the other team and alternated possession, things along those lines. Yet I look at the PLL and I see like some of the biggest stars, guys like Trevor Baptiste, who are absolute superstars and so good in that department. When you guys were, modeling this league and talking about what you were going to do, did that conversation even come up? Like, hey, this could be how we're different. We could feed in to those people in the sport that believe the game would be better without the face-off. Is it something that you guys have even thought about during this process?
Yeah, it has, and as a hot topic, it's unavoidable in some ways. But what I would say is, I think we realize that we don't know what the eventual future of the face-off will be, but what we wanted to do and what I think we've made incredible progress towards is making the face-off, a faster part of the game and a safer part of the game for our athletes, because these lockups, as we call them in the college game right now, with guys being tied up for a minute, at a time, and fully engaged in postures that make them pretty vulnerable. Wears these guys down. Like it's like being a running back. I would assume in the NFL. These guys are some of the most prime athletes because they know how important it is to take care of their buddies, and they're just tanks. You could look like a guy like Greg Rillian, who's just a physical specimen.
No doubt.
So what we've done is we've changed the way we approach the ball. We've put the players, we've aligned the sticks differently, and what it does is it leads to less lockups. We still have them occasionally, and they're shorter, and we have rules that encourage our face-off men to get the ball up and out faster. And we've seen some significant improvements there, and I think that to me, I was somebody that may have erred on the side of wondering, this isn't great for the sport. How do we make this? How do we make this something that is not frustrating for somebody that doesn't understand what the face-off brings, and is just seeing two guys like in a stalemate after each goal? So I think the goal was to increase the pace of play, not to make the face-off obsolete. And right now, I think we're in a pretty good place in terms of the compromise.
Hey, Josh, I want to talk to you about the play on the field also, maybe some surprises. I've been following, and I look at a couple of guys specifically, Kyle Hartzell, who went to Salisbury University, not a college powerhouse, certainly
not D3 level, they're
D1.
definitely a power, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Tim Troutner, the goalkeeper, the rookie out of High Point, again, not a powerhouse as far as D1 is concerned, but Hartzell has had a tremendous year as one of the long stick midfielders. In fact, perhaps even one of the best so far this year. Troutner's just put together an amazing year for the Redwoods. I just wonder, are you surprised? Have any players surprised you and kind of come out of the woodwork a little to shine that maybe you weren't expecting to see?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I'm always surprised because it's such a big transition for guys, no matter where they come from. And there have always been people that have come out and unexpectedly made impacts. So in that sense, it's become kind of the norm. On the other hand, as we were looking at the rules and how this might affect the play of midfield and shortening the field and how that would limit substitutions and getting guys on and off, we thought that there would be, and in some cases it's proven to be true that some of the two-way midfielders that'll stay on a little more, create more transition, can find more opportunities. But there has been, in my opinion, there's been less of an impact there than expected. So I think in terms of players that make the transition and make the leap, I think Troutner's a great example of a for a goalie to go from college to pro level shots and be seeing and stopping the ball the way he is pretty tremendous in terms of a transition and definitely worthy of note.
Josh Sims, head of lacrosse for the PLL, with us on PLL Weekly. Josh, let me follow up on that. We were talking before you came on about this weekend and both the All-Star game itself and also afterwards the skills competition that's going to be taking place that'll be streaming on the NBC Sports Gold app. What are you most looking forward to seeing? Like, I don't even know that I know yet all the skills competitions that we're going to see, but what are you looking forward to seeing most as a fan of the product on Sunday nights?
That's a tough question because I really, we've got some of the freestyle competition, I think, is one where I'm always impressed by what our players are capable of doing. So I'm really excited for that one, I think. Fastest shot is always kind of like a long-time favorite and a curious point for me because I just see these guys like shooting harder and harder each year, and now we see some of our polls, like pulling up from 20 yards because they're following through at 15 and at the 2-point arc. So those two, and then just overall getting to see our players' skill on display across the board is really what I'm excited as a fan. We've got our work cut out for us to put on a good show, but I'm certainly excited to see our players out there demonstrating their skills.
Josh, final question for me. I'm interested in some of the markets that you guys have been in and that you are going to, specifically actually Los Angeles this weekend, which is your base. And what I'm saying is, you've been to Boston, you've been to New York, obviously Baltimore, D.C., for lesser or poorer, those are pretty much hotbeds for lacrosse, and they have been for years and years. Denver is now a hotbed for lacrosse. That's basically where you're out of. You guys will be there July 27 and 28. Albany now becoming a little bit of that because of their NCAA experience. But it's interesting to me that L.A. is probably the biggest city in the country where I'm not sure what the L.A. market, lacrosse-wise, is all about. Can you describe what that market is like and what the appetite is there?
I can't. I think we'll find out.
Yeah.
And I think we're learning more about it. My firsthand experience with lacrosse in California has been a very positive one, and I've seen the game grow from when I was in high school and going out to the Bay Area and getting to play against some great teams back then, and just seeing how the game has grown has been really impressive as great players have come out out of California, great programs that have come out, have grown over the years. So that's my observation. I think now it's an opportunity for us to grow beyond the sport as well, and really put on a show. And that's one of the other things I think that we see as an opportunity, is really pulling new fans in. And what better place to do that than such a massive metropolitan area like LA, where there's some respect for showmanship and a little flair.
Absolutely. Well, listen, like the first 6 weeks, we'll be watching this weekend. Again, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's prime time in the East. It's the first annual All-Star game for the PLL. It's from Bank of California Stadium in Los Angeles. Josh Sims, head of lacrosse, PLL, thank you so much. Good luck this weekend, and good luck the rest of the way.
My pleasure. Thanks.
And that is Josh Sims joining us here on PLL Weekly. And while I've got Glenn Clark here for the next few minutes, just a quick banter conversation to kind of wrap us up here from the Live Casino Hotel Studios in Baltimore. And again, we're brought to you by Mobil 1 Synthetic Oil. It keeps your engine running like new. Synthetic motor oils, trusted protection, the Mobil Advantage. You know, Glenn, I think we may have had this conversation before, but it's been a while. This sport in general, this league in particular, you know, there's not a lot of room in this country for major sports. You've got your four, and, you know, maybe some would consider MLS. I don't know.
It's certainly grown significantly.
It's grown,
yes.
Absolutely. You know, is there an appetite for another major sport?
It's a fascinating question. I've always thought about this in like the where can they go, conversation. When I looked at the PLL schedule to begin with, I said, these make a lot of sense. Like, I think we've seen, you referenced the LA, it's still a bit of an unknown, but we've seen more college games on the West Coast, more teams picking up and playing a game out there. Maryland's done it in recent years, and they're typically played at like big high school stadiums, things along those lines. It's not like they're playing in massive football stadiums. So this will be an interesting, situation where you have a legit soccer stadium and pro lacrosse, and how does that look? What's the feel for it? But I think we've seen more and more. I really don't know the answer, Gary. Like, I don't know that it's an exposure problem. I don't know at this point that there's so many people in the country that still haven't seen it, that if they could just see it, they would become lacrosse fanatics. As much as I think there's, in the regions where lacrosse is beloved, it's been a tradition for a very long time, and it's just a game that we love. Is there still room for growth? I think so. I think there's still, places where the game can grow a bit. But is there a limit to that? I think my fear, as somebody who loves the sport and as somebody who, makes money off of the sport, things along those lines, is that, there'll always be a limit to that. There will always be a limit to how far it can go because, as you say, we've got so many major sports already in this country. I don't know that there's room for more. I don't know that there's a spot, and every time we seem to think that another sport might be moving into that realm. Remember, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we thought NASCAR was becoming, the fourth or the fifth major sport. Well, in places where they love NASCAR, they can't fill tracks anymore for races. Mixed martial arts was the thing a few years ago, right? 10 years ago, we thought the UFC was going to be that next one that was really going to captivate everyone and get a huge piece of the audience. And they maybe have 2 or 3 events now during the course of the year that people are really in on. And outside of that, I'm guessing an average, you're a sports fan, I'm guessing you couldn't name 5 UFC fighters at this point.
That's true.
So my gut is we want it to grow more, but there's always going to be a limit, unfortunately.
I think you're right. I don't know the answer either, but I think there are a couple interesting things here. Number one, the path that the MLS has followed for the last 15 or 20 years, I think is a good path. And what I mean by that is there were a number of leagues in this country. The first thing that the MLS had to do was make sure that it was the best league in the country.
Right.
And it is the best league in the country in
here,
terms of
yes,
outdoor soccer.
no question.
Okay. The next phase for them was to build soccer-specific stadiums.
Right size.
With the right size, 20,000, 15,000, whatever it was. I tell this story a lot, but it's absolutely true. My son and I were in Portland, Oregon a few summers ago and happened to catch a Portland Timbers game right downtown in the middle of the city, 18,000.
This is their old minor league baseball stadium.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. Retrofitted, beautiful stadium. 18,000, packed. We were in the end zone, basically, with the Timber Army.
Right.
They chant all game long.
the scene is unbelievable.
It's fantastic. I say to this day, and I've been to Super Bowls, World
Right.
Series, etc. It's the greatest sports experience I've ever had.
I believe that.
Okay,
I believe that.
Soccer-specific stadiums, the right size in the right cities. That's another thing the MLS did well. If the PLL can do that and make sure that it's the best league and perhaps the only league after a while out there and have their own stadiums, I think the one thing that the PLL is doing as this country continues to get younger is the social media presence and the way that it delivers its product is a tremendous benefit to them.
Well,
and if they can continue to do that, I think they've got something.
I think it's been, I don't want to say their biggest advantage. I think people would say their biggest advantage is the players, right? Like they have the biggest stars. Not to say that there aren't still other really good players that aren't playing in other leagues or doing other things, but the PLL has the most marketable stars in all of lacrosse. So that's the biggest advantage they have. But I think secondarily, what you're referring to, the social media aspect, the trying to touch what it is that lacrosse fans are into or would be inclined to be into, they've done an absurdly good job with that. And it's not just the social media. I think that, as Josh referred to, that party, that event that they are hosting around the games in every town they go to, the PLL zone, the DJs, the embracing selfie stations, things along those lines, they've done a really good job with that. I think those are the two biggest advantages that I've seen so far from the PLL. The game itself, once it starts playing, and that's why that part was so interesting to me when we were chatting with Josh, the game itself to me still sort of seems like any other lacrosse, right? Like I know they've made the field a little bit smaller, they've done some other things.
Yeah.
Exactly
Sure.
right. But for the most part, it still feels largely like any other brand of lacrosse. I should reference they also have the 2-point goals and things like that. But it still just sort of feels like lacrosse. That's why the question I asked, and I've never, you and I have never talked about the face-off thing before. That to me was interesting, right? Like when they were trying to figure out how they wanted to separate themselves, was that something that was discussed? Because it's a growing conversation within the game to just get rid of the face-off, that it sucks up too much time where there isn't really any action. It's not something that people really want to watch. Two guys, you can't even really tell what they're doing when they're out there. They're just sort of crouched down. Yes, some guys are really good at it, but outside of that, there's nothing exciting. It's not a great highlight to share on social media. And, frankly, and you're trying to see your team come back, you kind of like the idea of if I score a goal, I know where the ball is going next. Now, I guess the argument would be if you're trying to come back.
Yeah, but just the opposite, right?
Right.
I mean, I think it's such an integral part of the game, and especially gives a team an opportunity to make a comeback.
I tend to agree, Steiner. I've struggled with it, right? Like, I'm so used to it that I just can't fathom lacrosse without it. But if the concept is we want more up and down, if we're going to play, it's not 60 minutes in the PLL. It's 48 minutes in the PLL. If we're going to play 48 minutes, I want 48 minutes of action.
Yeah.
I want 48 minutes of up and down the field. I don't want 35 minutes of up and down the field and 13 minutes of sort of hunched over in the middle of the field, ball stuck there. And I thought Josh's answer was interesting, which is, look, we've tried to do some different things with the face-off itself to make it go quicker so that it's a less intrusive part of the game. They admitted it's something that they were thinking about. And, Josh even sort of alluded to the idea that he was maybe on board with being one of the guys that would say, let's just not have it. I think it's an interesting conversation that exists within the sport. And I think that was one of the things that really interested me about what their goals were for the actual play on the field to sort of differentiate yourself from other lacrosse that exists.
I just think that one of the reasons why these games are so close, and even in the college game, if you just run down the scores from the college game, most of the games, I don't know what the number is, maybe it's not most,
right,
but a lot of the games are 1 and 2 goal games. And I think one of the
particularly
reasons,
in conference play.
Correct.
Right.
I think one of the reasons why that is because teams that have a good face-off specialist have a big advantage, and even though they may not have the field players that the other team may have, they have an opportunity to come back, win games, etc. I still think that one of the biggest reasons why games are close in the sport is because of the face-off.
I think there's something to be said for that, Steiner. I don't have the research in front of me, right? Like, I haven't done a case study on it.
Just a gut.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think there's definitely something to be said for that, and it would be interesting to see if there was a season with no face-offs, what that would look like.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I certainly think that getting the shot clock in has helped that as well. But I don't know. It's a fascinating part of the conversation. I don't have a strong opinion about it. I know it's something that a lot of people within the sport have a strong opinion about, and I admittedly don't have a strong opinion about one way or the other. I appreciate someone who's really good at facing off. I appreciate Trevor Baptiste. I appreciate the great face-off specialists that I've seen over the years. Obviously, Paul Cantabena, maybe the greatest of all time. I've appreciated that. Does that mean that I think it would ruin the game if it didn't exist. Do I think there's a chance that it might, be more flowing and more of what it is that we want? Ideas that we always want it to be the fastest, sport on 2 feet, right? Like, that's the concept of lacrosse. Would that help? Maybe, arguably. I'm not telling you that I want it that way. It's just I think there's an argument for it. That's all.
Sounds good. Hey, listen, that's going to do it for this week. Now, you're out next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm at the beach. I'm at the beach making sure my kids don't drown.
Right.
That's what I'm doing, getting buried underneath sand. That's
Okay,
what
so
I'm
we
doing
want you
next
to
week.
make sure that you do that well.
Yeah,
okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Griffin
Stein.
Bass will be with us next week, and then we'll welcome you back in a couple weeks.
Looking forward to it.
We'll have a lot to talk about. From the live casino and hotel studios, this is Gary Stein, Glenn Clark, Griffin Bass. Thank you so much for joining PLL Weekly. All-Star Game Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, NBC Sports Network. That's NBCSN. And then, of course, streaming live on NBC Gold will be the